Vanessa Caldwell thought she was humiliating an ordinary woman that evening. But before the night was over, she would discover that the quiet stranger she mocked held the power to reshape her entire world, and the realization would leave her standing in silence while everyone around her watched. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The harbor lights shimmered across the water outside Seabrook House, one of Boston's most exclusive waterfront restaurants. Luxury sedans lined the valet entrance. Crystal chandeliers glowed behind towering glass windows. Inside, politicians, executives, and socialites filled the dining room, their conversations blending with the soft sound of live piano music. It was the kind of place where appearances seemed to matter almost as much as money. At exactly 7:15 in the evening, Avery Bennett stepped through the front doors alone. At 38, she carried herself with calm confidence, though nothing about her appearance attracted special attention. She wore a simple cream sweater, dark slacks, and comfortable shoes. There were no designer logos, no flashy jewelry, and no entourage following behind her. To most observers, she looked like an ordinary professional stopping by for dinner after work. What nobody in the room knew was that Avery had spent the last decade building one of the fastest-growing technology firms in America. She preferred privacy over attention and simplicity over display. Across the restaurant sat Vanessa Caldwell and her circle of wealthy friends. Vanessa was a familiar face in Boston society, known for her lavish parties and constant appearances in lifestyle magazines. Her tailored white dress, diamond bracelet, and perfectly styled blonde hair seemed designed to announce her status before she spoke a single word. As Avery approached the hostess stand, Vanessa glanced in her direction. Her eyes lingered for only a moment before a faint smirk appeared. Miranda Hawthorne, seated beside her, followed her gaze and quietly laughed. Neither woman bothered lowering her voice. "She looks lost," Miranda said. "Maybe she thinks this is the cafe next door." Several people at the table chuckled. Vanessa took a sip of sparkling water and smiled. "Give it a minute," she replied. "Someone will point her in the right direction." The comments were subtle enough to avoid open confrontation, yet sharp enough to sting if overheard. Avery appeared not to notice. She simply offered a polite smile to the hostess and provided her reservation information. For a moment, everything seemed routine. Then the hostess's expression changed. She checked the screen again. A second employee stepped closer. Quiet whispers followed. Nearby guests began paying attention. Vanessa noticed immediately. Her smile widened. Something interesting was happening. Within seconds, the restaurant's VIP manager, Ethan Brooks, emerged from a private hallway and walked directly toward the front desk. His eyes moved from the reservation screen to Avery's modest clothing and back again. The atmosphere shifted. Conversation slowed. Curious glances turned toward the entrance. Ethan folded his hands and spoke with a professional smile that somehow felt cold. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for several nearby guests to hear. "There appears to be an issue with your VIP reservation." Avery remained calm, her expression unchanged despite the sudden attention gathering around her. She glanced briefly at the reservation screen before looking back at Ethan Brooks. "There must be some mistake," she said politely. "The reservation was confirmed 3 days ago." Ethan offered a practiced smile, but his eyes revealed skepticism. He tapped the screen again and adjusted his posture. "The reservation exists," he admitted. "The issue is that it was placed under our Harbor Crown VIP program." Several nearby guests exchanged curious looks. The Harbor Crown section was the most exclusive area in the restaurant, reserved for celebrities, executives, and high-profile investors. Avery nodded. "That is correct." Ethan hesitated for a moment, clearly expecting uncertainty. Instead, he found quiet confidence. Across the dining room, Vanessa Caldwell leaned back in her chair, enjoying the spectacle. "This should be interesting," she said softly to Miranda Hawthorne. Their table laughed. The sound carried farther than they intended. Avery heard it, but showed no reaction. Ethan folded his arms. "Ma'am, Harbor Crown guests usually arrive with membership credentials or advance verification. Then perhaps you can verify mine, Avery replied. Her voice remained steady. The composure irritated Vanessa more than if Avery had argued. Most people became defensive under pressure. This woman simply stood there as if she belonged. The contrast only fueled the curiosity spreading through the room. At a nearby service station, a young hostess named Rachel Turner watched uneasily. Rachel had helped process the reservation earlier that week. She vaguely remembered seeing notes attached to the account, notes that had prompted unusual attention from upper management. Something about the situation felt wrong. Yet Ethan was her supervisor, and challenging him publicly could create problems she was not prepared to face. She remained silent, though the discomfort on her face grew. Ethan cleared his throat. I am afraid verification is not that simple. Why not? Avery asked. Because Harbor Crown access is reserved for a very specific clientele. The statement hung in the air. Several guests immediately understood the implication. Vanessa smiled behind her wine glass. Miranda nearly laughed aloud. Avery studied Ethan for a moment. Are you suggesting I do not qualify? Ethan quickly forced another smile. I am simply saying that appearances can sometimes create confusion. A few people chuckled. Rachel lowered her eyes. The room was beginning to feel less like a restaurant and more like a stage. Avery remained perfectly composed. Then verify the reservation. Her answer was simple, direct, reasonable. Ethan seemed caught off guard by her persistence. Most people would have walked away by now. Vanessa decided to join the conversation. Rising from her table, she approached the entrance with graceful confidence. Honestly, she said, addressing Ethan but making sure everyone could hear. You are being very patient. The dining room grew quieter. Vanessa, Ethan said cautiously. I am sure she means well, Vanessa continued. But Harbor Crown exists for a reason. If anyone could walk in and claim a VIP table, the entire program would lose its value. More laughter followed. Avery turned toward her. For the first time, the two women faced each other directly. Vanessa's smile carried the effortless arrogance of someone accustomed to getting her way. No offense, Vanessa added, but perhaps the standard dining room would be a better fit. The words landed like a public verdict. Rachel looked horrified. Even some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Yet Avery remained silent. Ethan sensed an opportunity to end the situation. He straightened his jacket and looked directly at Avery. Then, loud enough for nearly everyone in the restaurant to hear, he said, if you believe this reservation belongs to you, perhaps you can provide proof of your Harbor Crown authorization right now. A hush settled over the entrance as dozens of eyes shifted toward Avery Bennett. Ethan Brooks stood waiting, his expression calm but unmistakably challenging. The question he had asked was no longer directed only at her. It had become a performance for the entire restaurant. Avery looked at him steadily. I was not informed that I would need to carry proof of authorization to use a reservation your staff already confirmed, she said. Her voice remained even. Ethan spread his hands. Policies exist for a reason. Vanessa Caldwell smiled. That sounds reasonable to me. Several guests nodded. The social pressure in the room grew stronger. People who knew nothing about Avery had already begun choosing sides. Some assumed Ethan must be correct. Others simply enjoyed the unfolding drama. At a nearby table, a businessman quietly lifted his phone, pretending to check messages while actually watching the confrontation. The live piano music continued in the background, but the atmosphere felt strangely tense. Rachel Turner remained frozen behind the hostess stand. Something kept bothering her. She knew she had seen Avery's reservation before. More importantly, she remembered how unusual the internal notes had been. Most VIP reservations contained routine information. This one had triggered messages from corporate offices she had never heard of. Rachel glanced toward a filing drawer beneath the desk. Her heart began beating faster. Meanwhile, Vanessa took another step forward. I think everyone here understands what is happening, she said loudly. Exclusive programs are exclusive for a reason. Miranda Hawthorne laughed softly. Imagine how chaotic it would be otherwise. More scattered laughter followed. Avery neither flinched nor argued. That composure only seemed to irritate Vanessa further. People expected embarrassment. They expected excuses. Instead, Avery stood with the quiet confidence of someone who felt no need to impress strangers. Ethan noticed it too. Perhaps there is a misunderstanding, he said. If you can provide any verification, we can resolve this immediately. Avery reached into her purse. Several guests leaned forward. Vanessa folded her arms, clearly anticipating failure. Avery removed a slim leather card holder. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Vanessa smirked. Avery opened it and briefly examined its contents. Inside were several business cards and a folded note. Before anyone could see clearly, she closed it again. "I do not carry documents proving my worth," she said calmly. "I came here for dinner, not an interview." A few uncomfortable looks appeared around the room. The statement was simple, yet it landed harder than many expected. Rachel suddenly remembered something else. During the reservation review, she had glimpsed a corporate logo attached to the account. It had seemed familiar at the time. Now she realized where she had seen it before. It appeared regularly in national business magazines and financial news reports. Her eyes widened. She quickly looked back toward Avery. At that exact moment, a small silver card slipped partially from Avery's holder before she tucked it away. Rachel caught a glimpse of the logo embossed in the corner. Her stomach dropped. The realization was immediate. Something was very wrong about the way this woman was being treated. Yet before Rachel could speak, Vanessa stepped directly into the center of the gathering crowd. Her smile grew wider as she turned toward Ethan. "There is actually a very simple solution," she announced. The room became silent. Vanessa pointed toward the standard dining area across the restaurant. "Why do not we stop wasting everyone's time and ask her to leave the Harbor Crown section entirely?" The suggestion landed exactly as Vanessa Caldwell intended. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. The clinking of glasses seemed to fade. Even the pianist in the corner appeared quieter as attention focused entirely on Avery Bennett. Vanessa stood confidently beneath the chandelier light, her expression polished and triumphant. Miranda Hawthorne watched with open amusement while several guests exchanged knowing smiles. Ethan Brooks hesitated for only a second before nodding. The decision had effectively been made for him. "Perhaps that would be best," he said carefully. "We can certainly accommodate you in our standard dining area." The words were delivered politely, but their meaning was unmistakable. Avery was being told she did not belong. Rachel Turner felt her stomach tighten. She knew this had gone too far. Yet surrounded by wealthy guests, senior management, and the growing pressure of public opinion, she remained silent. Around the room, people began returning to their conversations, already treating the outcome as settled. Some looked satisfied. Others looked uncomfortable. A few avoided eye contact altogether. They had witnessed an injustice, but none wanted to become part of it. Avery stood motionless for a moment. Her face revealed no anger, no embarrassment, and no desperation. That calmness felt almost unnatural amid the hostility surrounding her. Vanessa noticed it and found herself strangely irritated. Why was this woman not reacting? Why was she not arguing or pleading? "I am sure there are plenty of wonderful restaurants nearby," Vanessa added with a smile. "Some places are simply a better fit than others." A few soft laughs followed. Then Avery finally spoke. Her voice was quiet enough that people leaned closer to hear. "You may be right," she said. "Not every place deserves every guest." The room grew still again. Vanessa's smile faltered for the briefest instant. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. The sentence contained no insult, yet somehow it carried more weight than an argument ever could. Avery continued, "I have learned that people reveal who they are long before they learn who someone else is." Nobody responded. A hush settled across the entrance. Even those who had been enjoying the spectacle suddenly felt exposed by the truth in her words. Rachel lowered her eyes. Ethan looked away. Vanessa forced a laugh, but it sounded thinner than before. Avery picked up her purse and adjusted the strap over her shoulder. She neither demanded respect nor asked for fairness. She simply accepted the situation with a level of dignity that made the behavior around her appear smaller by comparison. Then she turned toward the exit. As she walked across the polished marble floor, dozens of eyes followed her. Some guests felt vindicated. Others felt uneasy. Deep down, a few were beginning to wonder whether they had misjudged the entire situation. Near the entrance, Avery paused beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the harbor. Beyond the glass, the dark water reflected hundreds of city lights. For a second, she stood alone against the backdrop of Boston's skyline, calm and composed despite everything that had happened. Then she reached into her purse and removed her phone. Her thumb moved across the screen. Just one message. Just a few words. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. She pressed send, and slipped the phone away. Inside the restaurant, nobody paid attention. Vanessa was already returning to her table, convinced the evening was over. Ethan exhaled in relief. Rachel remained frozen behind the hostess stand. But somewhere else in the city, that message appeared on a screen, and the person who received it stopped what he was doing immediately. Avery Bennett remained by the harbor window for a few quiet moments after sending the message. Outside, the dark water reflected ribbons of gold and silver from the city skyline. A cold breeze brushed against the glass, and for the first time that evening, a trace of sadness touched her eyes. Not because of the humiliation. She had faced judgment before. Success had taught her that many people measured worth by appearances. What hurt was something else entirely. Tonight was supposed to mean something special. 10 years earlier, Avery had stood in a tiny apartment with her father, a mechanic who had worked 60-hour weeks for most of his life. They had celebrated her first major business contract with takeout food and paper plates because that was all they could afford. Before he passed away 2 years later, he had given her a simple piece of advice she never forgot. When success comes, he had told her, never let it change how you see people. The person serving your food deserves the same respect as the person signing your checks. Every year on this date, Avery honored that memory with a quiet dinner. No publicity, no executives, no cameras, just gratitude. Seabrook House had been chosen because it represented a milestone she and her father once dreamed about. Standing there now, she felt disappointed, but not for herself. She felt disappointed that so many people still confused status with character. Behind her, the restaurant slowly returned to normal conversation. Vanessa Caldwell and her friends laughed comfortably at their table. Ethan Brooks resumed greeting guests. Yet one person could not move on. Rachel Turner finally gathered the courage to step away from the hostess stand. She approached Avery cautiously, her hands clasped together. "Ma'am," she said softly, "I just wanted to say that I am sorry." Avery turned toward her with a gentle smile. Rachel looked embarrassed. "I should have said something earlier." Avery shook her head. "You do not owe me an apology. But what happened was not right." Rachel lowered her voice. "I knew something felt wrong." Avery's expression softened. Doing the right thing is rarely easy when everyone else is moving in the opposite direction. Rachel blinked, surprised by the kindness in her response. Most people would have been angry. Some would have demanded names or consequences. Avery simply offered understanding. "Do not be too hard on yourself," she continued. "Character is built one choice at a time. You still have plenty of choices ahead of you." Rachel felt her throat tighten. Those words stayed with her. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Rachel glanced back toward the restaurant entrance. Something had changed. At first, it was only a faint sound in the distance. A low mechanical hum drifting across the harbor road. Avery noticed it too. The noise grew steadily louder. Several valets near the entrance straightened their posture. Guests closest to the windows began turning their heads. Inside the restaurant, conversations gradually faded. Even Vanessa paused in the middle of a sentence. The sound was not dramatic, but it carried authority. Powerful engines. Multiple vehicles. Approaching together. One by one, headlights swept across the glass facade of Seabrook House, casting moving reflections through the dining room. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Nobody knew why, but everyone felt it. And as the first black vehicle rolled to a smooth stop directly outside the entrance, the entire mood of the evening changed. The black vehicles came to a stop with quiet precision outside Seabrook House. No flashing lights. No dramatic display. Just the unmistakable presence of people accustomed to being taken seriously wherever they went. Through the restaurant windows, guests watched as several men and women in tailored business attire stepped out and moved toward the entrance with purposeful urgency. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations faded. Forks paused halfway to plates. Even the staff seemed uncertain about what was happening. Ethan Brooks frowned as he looked toward the doors. He recognized one of the arriving executives immediately. Then another. His confidence began to crack. These were not ordinary guests. Rachel Turner noticed the change in his face and felt her pulse quicken. The front doors opened. A tall man with silver hair entered first. He was Charles Whitaker, co-founder of the entire Seabrook Hospitality Group. His appearance alone was enough to command attention. Ethan immediately straightened his posture. Several employees did the same. But what shocked him was the fact that Charles barely glanced at anyone inside the restaurant. Instead, His eyes searched the room until they landed on Avery Bennett standing quietly near the harbor window. The moment he saw her, his expression changed completely. He walked directly toward her without hesitation. Behind him followed senior executives from corporate headquarters. Vanessa Caldwell felt a knot form in her stomach. She had met Charles twice at charity galas. Powerful people usually expected others to approach them. Charles Whitaker was now crossing an entire restaurant to approach the woman she had mocked less than 10 minutes earlier. The room grew silent. Avery remained calm as Charles stopped in front of her. "Ms. Bennett," he said. "I came as quickly as I could." Ethan felt the color drain from his face. Vanessa stared in disbelief. The executives behind Charles exchanged concerned looks. Avery offered a small smile. "Thank you for coming, Charles." The familiarity between them immediately changed everything. "Not Mr. Whitaker. Not Sir Charles." As if they had known each other for years. Charles glanced around the restaurant. His eyes settled briefly on Ethan, then on Vanessa, then on the cluster of guests who had witnessed the humiliation. The warmth disappeared from his expression. "I received your message," he said quietly. "I am deeply sorry." A hush fell over the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ethan suddenly remembered the mysterious reservation notes. Rachel remembered the corporate logo on the silver card. Vanessa remembered every sarcastic comment she had made. Piece by piece, the truth began assembling itself in their minds. Charles turned toward Ethan. Was Ms. Bennett denied access to her reserved table? Ethan swallowed hard. There may have been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Charles repeated. His voice remained calm, which somehow made it more intimidating. The reservation was personally approved by corporate leadership. Vanessa felt her heartbeat quicken. For the first time that evening, genuine uncertainty appeared behind her polished smile. Charles looked back at Avery. There was respect in his expression, the kind of respect powerful people reserve for someone even more important than themselves. Then he spoke words that seemed to suck the air from the room. "Ms. Bennett, would you like me to explain your role in this company to everyone present?" For several long seconds, nobody answered. The dining room seemed frozen in place. Charles Whitaker's question hung in the air while dozens of guests stared at Avery Bennett. Ethan Brooks felt his mouth go dry. Vanessa Caldwell could hear her own heartbeat. Even the executives standing behind Charles remained silent, allowing the moment to unfold. Avery looked around the room. Her gaze passed over the curious faces, the uncomfortable staff members, and finally settled on Rachel Turner. Then she returned her attention to Charles. "Only if it helps people understand what happened," she said softly. "Not to embarrass anyone." The answer alone changed something in the room. Many expected anger. Others expected revenge. Instead, they saw restraint. Charles nodded slowly. "Very well." He turned toward the crowd. 6 months ago, Seabrook Hospitality Group faced a serious financial challenge. Several expansion projects were failing. Hundreds of jobs were at risk. Murmurs spread through the restaurant. Many had never heard that story. Charles continued. The investment that stabilized this company came from Bennett Capital Ventures. The room went silent again. Vanessa frowned. The name sounded familiar. Then realization began to spread. Bennett Capital Ventures was not just another investment firm. It was one of the most respected private investment groups in the country. Charles gestured toward Avery. The founder and majority owner of that company is Ms. Avery Bennett. A collective gasp moved through the room. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second. Rachel felt vindicated. Vanessa simply stared. Charles was not finished. The Harbor Crown reservation was approved because Ms. Bennett is not merely a guest of this company. He paused. She is one of its principal owners. This time nobody spoke at all. The room had become perfectly still. Vanessa's face lost color. Miranda Hawthorne looked down at the floor. Several guests exchanged stunned glances. The woman they had dismissed as an outsider was one of the people responsible for keeping the entire company alive. Rachel finally stepped forward. Her voice trembled slightly. "I remember the reservation notes," she said. "Corporate marked them with the highest priority level." Ethan looked at her in disbelief. Rachel swallowed hard but continued. "I should have spoken up sooner." Avery gave her an encouraging nod. "You are speaking up now," she said kindly. "That matters." Rachel smiled weakly, grateful for the support. Charles then revealed something else. "Most people know Bennett Capital for its investments," he said. What they may not know is that Ms. Bennett personally requested that no public recognition be attached to several employee assistance programs funded through her foundation. Several staff members looked confused. Charles turned toward them. The scholarship program that helped employees send their children to college. The emergency relief fund during the pandemic. The tuition reimbursement initiative. Those programs existed because of her. A hush fell over the room. Some employees looked visibly emotional. They had benefited from those opportunities without ever knowing who created them. Avery shifted uncomfortably. She clearly preferred the attention elsewhere. Vanessa felt smaller with every passing second. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The woman she had mocked had quietly improved countless lives while asking for nothing in return. Avery finally spoke. "Please remember something," she said. "Success is not measured by how many people recognize your name. It is measured by how many people are better off because you were here." No one laughed now. No one smirked. No one questioned whether she belonged. As guests looked at Avery Bennett, they no longer saw a woman in a simple sweater standing alone by a harbor window. They saw someone entirely different, and for the first time that evening, they truly saw her at all. The silence that followed Avery Bennett's words felt different from the silence that had filled the restaurant earlier. Before, it had been driven by judgment. Now it was driven by reflection. Guests who had once watched with curiosity now looked at her with genuine respect. Several employees stood a little straighter, as if reminded why their work mattered. Charles Whitaker allowed the moment to settle before speaking again. "We cannot change what happened tonight," he said, "but we can decide what happens next." His gaze moved toward Ethan Brooks. The manager looked shaken. The confidence that had once guided every decision was gone. In its place stood a man forced to confront the consequences of assumptions he had never questioned. Charles did not raise his voice. "Effective immediately, we will conduct a full review of our guest service policies and leadership training." Ethan nodded quietly. He understood the meaning behind those words. This was not public humiliation. It was accountability, the kind that demanded growth rather than punishment. Avery spoke before the situation could become more severe. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to learn," she said, "including people who make mistakes." Ethan looked at her with surprise. Of all the responses he expected, mercy was not one of them. Charles acknowledged her request with a respectful nod. Then his attention shifted toward Rachel Turner. "I also believe integrity should be recognized," he said. Rachel froze. "You spoke up when it mattered." Her eyes widened. "I almost did not." "But you did," Avery replied gently. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing what is right despite it." Several employees smiled. The tension in Rachel's face softened. For the first time that evening, she looked proud instead of nervous. Charles announced that Rachel would be invited to participate in a new employee leadership development program funded through the company's partnership with Avery's foundation. Applause spread through the restaurant. It started with a few staff members and gradually expanded throughout the dining room. The reaction was sincere. No one had been instructed to clap. They simply wanted to. Vanessa Caldwell remained silent at her table. Earlier, she had commanded attention effortlessly. Now she seemed almost invisible. The applause was not for wealth or status. It was for character. That realization unsettled her more than any public criticism could have. Avery accepted none of the praise for herself. Instead, she requested that the company establish a hospitality scholarship in honor of frontline employees whose kindness often went unnoticed. Charles immediately agreed. The executives behind him began taking notes. Just like that, the place where unfairness had occurred began transforming into something better. The atmosphere felt lighter. Staff members exchanged hopeful glances. Guests who had witnessed the evening from the beginning now understood they had seen something much larger than a disagreement over a table. They had witnessed the difference between influence and integrity. As conversations slowly resumed, Vanessa finally rose from her chair. She looked around the room and saw something she had never noticed before. Nobody seemed impressed by her social status anymore. The admiration she once relied upon had disappeared the moment people saw a better example standing beside the harbor window. And in that quiet realization, Vanessa learned the hardest lesson of all. The respect she had spent years demanding was the very thing Avery Bennett had earned without ever asking for it. As the evening slowly settled back into normal conversation, A sense of calm replaced the tension that had filled Seabrook House only an hour earlier. The harbor lights still shimmered across the water, and the soft piano music once again drifted through the dining room. Yet everything felt different. People were no longer looking at Avery Bennett with curiosity. They were looking at her with respect. Charles Whitaker personally escorted Avery to the Harbor Crown table that had been reserved for her from the beginning. It sat beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Boston Harbor, exactly where she had planned to spend the evening. For a moment, Avery stood quietly beside the table. Her gaze drifted toward the dark water outside. In her mind, she thought of her father. She remembered the small apartment, the paper plates, and the promise she had made to herself after he was gone. Success would never become an excuse to forget people. Tonight had tested that promise, and she was grateful she had not failed it. As Avery took her seat, Rachel Turner approached carrying a small framed card. "We found this in the reservation file," she said softly. Avery smiled the moment she saw it. Inside the frame was a handwritten note from her father, preserved beneath glass. Years earlier, she had scanned the original and attached a copy to important personal milestones. The message was simple. Character is how you treat people when they can do nothing for you. Rachel carefully placed it beside the table. Avery thanked her warmly. Across the room, Vanessa Caldwell stood alone near the entrance. The confidence she had worn all evening was gone. For several minutes, she watched Avery from a distance before finally gathering the courage to approach. Conversations grew quiet again as people noticed what was happening. Vanessa stopped beside the table. Her eyes were lowered. "Ms. Bennett," she said, "I owe you an apology." Avery looked up calmly. Vanessa took a slow breath. "What I said tonight was wrong. I judged you before I knew anything about you. And even worse, I judged you because I thought I knew exactly who you were." There was no excuse in her voice. No attempt to justify her behavior. Only honesty. "I am sorry." Avery studied her for a moment. Then she nodded. "Thank you for saying that." Vanessa seemed surprised by the kindness in the response. "I will understand if you never wish to see me again." Avery offered a faint smile. The purpose of a lesson is not to remain trapped in it. The purpose is to grow beyond it. Vanessa's eyes filled with emotion. She nodded quietly and walked away, carrying a lesson she would never forget. Later that evening, Charles officially invited Rachel into the company's leadership mentorship program. Several executives personally congratulated her. For the first time since joining Seabrook House, she felt seen. Not because of luck or connections, but because she had chosen integrity when it mattered. As the night drew to a close, Avery finally enjoyed the peaceful dinner she had originally planned. No speeches, no attention, just a quiet meal beside the harbor and the memory of a father who had taught her what true success looked like. Outside, the city lights reflected across the water like scattered stars. Inside, the restaurant felt warmer than before. And that night, everyone remembered that dignity does not need wealth to be recognized. It only needs someone humble enough to see it.